Bonjour, merci, and that's about as much French as I'm going to have for you today. My apologies. Um, as you've heard, my topic is algorithms and big data. I come from a broadcasting family, so of course my parents were very disappointed when I became a computer scientist. But I returned to journalism, initially as an editor at the Associated Press, and now I specialized in data-driven investigations. And in my adopted country of the United States, we have seen an enormous shift in how audiences consume news and other information, and reacting to this, how news organizations produce it. So I'm going to try to take you through a little of what this looks like, and based on talking to you and my research, perhaps what this means for European broadcasting. Really, this is the topic of my talk today. It's about reaching your audience. And that has become impossible without at least understanding algorithms and big data. And you can do even more if you are in a position to create algorithms. But this is the big change. We've gone from a world where broadcasters decided what people watch at any given moment, what people consume, to a world where audiences decide. And this is a large and significant change. First, I'm going to try to explain why algorithms. Why do we have these objects at all? The short answer is that we don't have much choice. And the reason we don't have a lot of choice is because the volume of content, the volume of information is massive. It has increased. So, for example, there is more video on YouTube than was broadcast on every network during all of the 20th century. Now, this doesn't mean necessarily people are watching more YouTube than television. That depends on the country and the demographic. In some places, yes. In some places, no. I'm merely saying this volume of information requires a computer to deal with it in a sensible way. And it's not just video, it's every medium. It's web pages, it's social media posts, even books. 130 million books ever published. How can you say that there is a canon of 400 classic books? That's a tiny fraction of a percent. So we need some way to guide us through this. And so we use computers. So here's an introduction to sort of how these processes operate. So say I'm trying to rank stories or posts, let's say. There are various factors I could use. For example, I want to put more recent things at the top. And then I'm interested also in how people are reacting. This is the new element in media, is we get instant feedback on everything we produce. So, of course, in some way, posts that are more popular should be ranked higher in the list. Now, of course, this isn't absolute. There are reasons to show things to people even if they're unpopular, but we'll get to that. This is, in fact, a slide from Facebook. This is how, this is the factors that Facebook says goes into their newsfeed ranking. So not just what the post is, the type of content, as it says there, but who posted it and when, and how other people have interacted. So you can imagine combining these factors in many different ways. So we need algorithms. We don't really have a choice. When it's not that we have 100 times too much content for any one person to consume, or 1,000 times. It's more like 1 million or 10 million times too much. There is simply no way that humans can sort through the volume of information that we have, especially when we get into personalization. There aren't enough editors to produce a personalized broadcast schedule or headlines for every member in the audience. Also, the other reason dealing with algorithms are necessary is because the major media platforms, the online media platforms, the Facebook, Google, Netflix, Amazon, and so forth, own the channel to the user. They are increasingly the medium through which people consume content. So we have to deal with them even if it's only to go through them. I want to try to shift your understanding of the meaning of this word channel. Traditionally, it has referred to a radio frequency, a broadcast frequency, or perhaps a position in a cable offering. But I don't think this is what the essence of a channel is. I would define a channel as the ability to put something in front of an audience. So maybe that's possible because you own that broadcast frequency, but increasingly, as users are choosing what to watch, what it really means is users repeatedly come back to you. Maybe they have hit a subscribe button. Maybe they just know your brand and the algorithms with which they interact consistently rank your material higher because they've learned that the user likes it. Maybe they have they've indicated that they're interested in a particular topic and you produce material on that topic. The question to ask yourself is, can I put something in front of people right now? If the answer is yes, then you have a channel. So adapting to all of these changes, the Facebooks of the world controlling the distribution channels, in America we have seen a strategy which has come to be called distributed content. So this is sort of setting the stage for this strategy. This is from your own EBU research. You'll see that most countries are in the left-hand side here. They are in the left quadrant, meaning that the trust in television is decreasing. Meanwhile, this is from a report from the Reuters Institute for Journalism at Oxford. The demographics are pretty clear. Younger people are going more and more to online media. Television is skewing more and more to older folks. So purely on demographic arguments, we can expect that this very large shift towards online media consumption will continue. I'm sure this is no surprise to any of you. And even the homepage, even for a top-tier property like the New York Times, is seeing a massive decrease in visits. Now, the New York Times itself is doing okay. They are not seeing a reduction in subscribers or even in the consumption of their content. All I'm saying here is that people don't get to it through the homepage, which means that the editors of the New York Times, the people who decide what's on the homepage, have less and less influence. In fact, most of the traffic for the New York Times, and in fact every organization, comes from social media these days. So increasingly, we have to put the content where the users are. BuzzFeed is the prime example of this trend. Most of BuzzFeed's reach does not happen on its own site. It happens on the variety of platforms to which BuzzFeed publishes. So the social media networks, of course, their apps, they also have partnerships with all kinds of other distributors. Their attitude is, we don't care where you view our content. We will go where you are. And that accounts for their reach. Now, of course, BuzzFeed is an entertainment company and is not the most serious content, but that reach subsidizes one of the largest investigative journalism teams in the US. They have a team of about 30 investigative journalists. And so their strategy for supporting journalism is to go where the user is, to make their money through that reach, and to use that to fund their more serious work. So for the moment, we have to go through these platforms because that's where the audience is, right? We don't have a choice but to engage with algorithms as producers of content. In the future, perhaps we could have our own platform in Europe, and I'll talk about that more in a moment. So between the need to sort through huge volumes of information and the fact that the platforms who own the channels to the user are using such algorithms, they are certainly not something that is going away. They are not something we can ignore today or in the future. I want to switch a little bit to, this is supposed to be big data and algorithms, so that was the algorithms part, here's the data part. I want to talk about metrics. When you have to use an algorithm, either your own or someone else's, to reach the audience, there is the question of knowing whether you've reached anyone at all. The answer is metrics. So my first recommendation is have metrics. Have metrics that are suited to the digital age and the way that people distribute and consume content today. This is Chartbeat. This is a popular metrics and analytics platform, but it doesn't really matter what you use. You'll find something that's suited to your situation. This gives a view of how every item, every video, every post is performing, broken down by audience. And it also gives you extremely useful information such as how many people are returning. As I said, I define a channel as the ability to put something in front of an audience. If each person comes only once to your site or your app, you don't have that ability. You need to build that repeat viewership, that loyalty. And perhaps the downside of not owning the channel is that you can't guarantee that everybody is going to sit down in front of the evening news. The upside is that we have much more detailed information on user behavior. So we have a much clearer picture on who is returning and what is driving that. And so this type of information is what you need to build an online audience. And it has to be for more than management. It's good if you see the metrics. It's much more useful if you have a culture of metrics in your newsroom. This is actually a picture from the Associated Press newsroom where I used to work. Just like we have, monitors of the news up on screens in the newsroom, more and more newsrooms have monitors that show how recent programs and posts are performing. More often, journalists will access this information at their own desks. And so not only must this information be available, but staff needs to be trained on how to interpret and use this information. Now, when I talk about metrics with journalists, I very often get the reaction, but my job is not to be popular. It's to put what is important in front of people. We have this public service mission. And I agree. Absolutely, I agree. My response to that is count what's important to you, right? So if you care about particular types of content, particular types of interactions, make sure your metrics reflect that. You can design your own metrics. You can design your own data. So what are your values and what can you count? And it must reflect both your values and your operational goals, right? Because you have to have an audience of a certain size to be significant culturally. And then, assuming that everybody has these metrics and everybody agrees that they are the right metrics and everybody's using them, you have to listen to them. It has been said, in fact, by a French publisher, that the first duty of a journalist is to be read. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. If you are telling a story, and it is an important story, and nobody is choosing to watch it, you have a problem. You have to find a different way to tell the story. So the metrics will tell you that you have a problem, but that's not going to help you if you ignore the metrics. The next step is to try a new storytelling approach. So we are also living in an era of tremendous creativity in approaches to telling stories, and that includes not just sort of narrative format and so on within traditional television and radio, but all of these other channels that we've seen. We've seen all kinds of interactive presentations. We've seen infographics and data visualization. We've seen live blogging. We've seen live streaming. The number of ways to tell a story has exploded. Or tell a different story. But I don't think we can anymore afford to produce things that nobody watches. We don't have the resources for that. So I've described the situation that American media finds themselves in because it's sort of crept up on American news organizations. In the last few years, they woke up and said, my God, Facebook owns our audience. We no longer have a direct connection. And this distributed content strategy arose as a reaction to that. And right now there's a lot of talk and a lot of consternation, a lot of worry about the situation. But in Europe, the situation is a little bit different. The big online platforms are newer here, and they're just starting to build their markets in a serious way. And so I think you have a window. You have a window of opportunity, and it will last only a few years for a European platform with a European algorithm. So I'm going to try to describe a little bit what that might look like. So as you know, there were recent regulatory changes requiring online video providers, I think they're sometimes called over-the-top providers, to hold at least 20% European content in their catalogs. And I think this is a positive step in many ways, although Netflix and Amazon already had 21% European content, so the practical effect is probably limited in the short term. And I know a lot of you have been considering or have been discussing regulation of various types. These are some of the things that one could regulate. You've already regulated the catalog percentage. The problem there is that you can force providers to have a certain percentage of content in their catalog. That's not the same as forcing them to present it, and it's certainly not the same as saying that people are watching it. So then you say, okay, well, we can regulate the design of algorithms. As someone who studies the design of algorithms for news recommendation, I can say that this is not as simple as it might seem. It is technically challenging to specify exactly what it is that you want. It's easy to get around technical specifications, and also this is changing so fast it might be premature to regulate the types of algorithms that you can build. And there's other directions that one could go. Perhaps it's my American bias, but I'm skeptical that you can solve this problem in a regulatory way. Instead, I would like to look towards a European content platform. So we already have one example that a European platform can compete with the big tech platforms, which is iPlayer, which has over 50% market share in the UK. But I think we're going to need more than national platforms. And the reason we're going to need more than national platforms is because there is an opportunity. There are opportunities for scale and sharing technological resources. And there's opportunities for content to travel between countries, as we are increasingly seeing. Someone is going to take advantage of this opportunity and build a pan-European content platform. The question is, will it be you or will it be someone else? And I think the recent strategy report from the BBC addresses this in a very interesting way. They said BBC Online will change from being a provider to a platform. What does that mean? It means they're going to open it up. They're going to allow other people to take their content and share it. So this is the distributed content model, right? The idea is don't be so precious about where people are watching our programming. Let the programming travel to where the audience is rather than requiring the audience to come to us. And they're going to, it says, surface content from other providers. So once they have the technical infrastructure, once they have the audience, they're saying, okay, well, what else can we put on here besides our content? And this is the essence of a platform strategy. It's a container, right? It is something that other people can put their content in as well. And this report was released just last month. And I think that European media is in a unique position to do this globally. I know that many of you are concerned with declining budgets and so forth, but I put this slide just to remind you that by global standards, you're actually very well funded. This is from a recent EBU report, and you can see the per capita spending on public service media in each country. And I've added the US, which is, compared to the European countries, second last. Right? So this would be a very difficult thing to do in the US, to get public media to own a platform. The money simply isn't there. In Europe, there's already tremendous resources. And you also have tremendously high levels of trust. You have some of the most trusted public service media brands in the world. So Europe is a unique place where you have the resources, you have the brand, and you have the technical know-how to produce such a platform. I don't see the same opportunity in any other region in the world. So what would it look like if we did this thing, if we built a European platform with a European algorithm? Well, if you did that, you would be in a position to decide. An algorithm is a view of the world. The first thing I teach my students, and I try to get them to understand over and over again, an algorithm is not a piece of mathematics. It is an editorial object. It embodies our editorial values. It embodies our ideas about what a good society is. And of course, journalism is more than a popularity content. We are interested in more than just getting the maximum number of viewers, the maximum number of engaged minutes, and all of these sort of things. In particular, news has to be more than what the audience asks for. And although personalization is key and opens up enormous opportunities for how people interact with the world, it can create filter bubbles, meaning only showing you what you already believe. This is what I mean by that. This is a graph of sales of political books during the 2008 election. More recent elections look similarly. Each square is a book. You can see very clearly there's a red side and a blue side. Red is Republican and blue is Democrats. And the little arrows are Amazon saying people who read this book also read that book. And what you find is that people read one side or the other. They read left-leaning political books or they read right-leaning political books. Almost no one reads both, just a few in the middle that kind of span that divide. And anywhere you look in online media consumption, you see these types of patterns. This is one of my favorite examples. This is a map of the Persian language blogosphere. So it's a little bit old now because these conversations are taking place on social media platforms rather than websites. But each dot is a blog. Dots are closer together when there are links between them. So when one person says, hey, check out this other blog. And what you find is that they cluster very neatly into sort of a secular and reformist versus conservative and religious axis. And so it's very natural to say, well, we want our algorithm to recommend things posted by people of both orientations. We, as in an alignment with classic journalism principles, we want to show both sides. But it's a little harder to say how to turn this into code, how to turn this into a process. It's not just show everybody a little bit of everything, because there's a lot of everything. For example, does everyone need to see poetry? Well, what if I don't like poetry? So we need to put a little bit of thought into exactly which types of diversity we want our algorithms to embody. And myself and many other researchers have been looking into how to design algorithms to do this and trying to specify the criteria, the values we want to embody in these systems. When we design these algorithms, we have a lot of data available, perhaps more than you might initially imagine. This is an incomplete list of the data available that an algorithm could use to make recommendations. Remember, the job of a recommendation algorithm is to take the millions and millions of pieces of content that I could show to you and order them and give you, the top 5 or the top 10 for any particular day. And so you have a lot of information. You have information from the user, everything from explicitly expressed preferences, so yes, I like celebrity news, to their location, what they've searched for, what they have liked, who they have followed on social media. You have all this information about the user. Then you have a lot of information about the story itself, where it happened, when it happened, who it discusses, the topics and so forth. This is broadly called content analysis, and there are sophisticated algorithms that can take text or increasingly video and actually categorize it and say, it discusses these people, it's on the topic of refugees, it's from this location. So there's as we get better and better artificial intelligence, computers are better and better at understanding what the topic and context of a story is. And then there's data from other people, and this is a new element. What do your friends like? Or what does everyone else like? Popularity isn't everything, but it does matter. If thousands and thousands, well, millions and millions of people are viewing a particular clip, perhaps that clip should be shown to other people as well. This is the idea of trending topics. And then last, but certainly not least, there's what editors think is important. The role of an editor has always been to make choices about what people should see. And this role does not disappear. First of all, our algorithms are designed with editorial values in mind. But on any given day, an editor can say, you know what, I think more people should see this. I want to boost this in the rankings. And there are many examples of such systems in operation today. In fact, even Facebook has news editors, as many of you may have discovered recently. And so the algorithm is not just a machine making choices. It's humans and machines working together to make a personalized recommendation for millions and millions of people. So what principles do we want our algorithms to embody with all of this data? A few years ago, I proposed the following criteria. In my personalized news feed, I should see stories which, where I have an expressed interest in the topic already. So if I said, yes, I'm really interested in the situation of the Greek banks, or whatever it may be, right? If I told you that I want to know it, then of course I should see it. But I should also see it if it affects me, if it happens in my neighborhood, in my country, or to people like me, or affects my interests. I should definitely see it. And then I should also see it if maybe it doesn't affect me personally, but there's something I could do to help others. So maybe it's a disaster in another country and they need volunteers and donations. You can, of course, make up your own criteria. The art of designing a recommendation algorithm is turning these types of values using this type of data into code. And this is a new field. There are an increasing number of people in the world with this type of expertise who are building these systems. And these people need to be working for you. But you can't make people watch things they don't want to watch. This is a fundamental principle of the on-demand era. Users have choice. So no matter what algorithm you build, no matter how sophisticated it is, somehow it has to take into account user preference and choice, or it will simply be ignored. And this brings us full circle to the question of metrics and understanding what it is that your audience is actually engaging with. So to get there, to get to types of content and modes of storytelling and channels that people are actually engaging with, I wish I could stand up here and say, okay, this is what you do. But in fact, we don't really know what to do yet. The landscape is shifting so fast, and so many new platforms are appearing and so many new ways of storytelling that this is a very experimental time. In particular, it's a difficult thing to manage. There is the feeling of loss of control. It used to be that if I was the editor for a news organization, I got to say what is news. But the audience now chooses. This has a number of implications. One of them is that the power to choose and the power to experiment needs to devolve to the reporters, to the staff who have the closest connection to the audience. This is an experimental era, so people need the freedom to experiment. And in particular, I think there's a note here on diversity. If you want to attract a younger audience, or you need to hire an audience that looks like them. Also, a younger audience will already be using these platforms. I don't know what the magic formula is. Nobody knows what the magic formula is. This is what Clay Shirky, who is a noted American author and media theorist, means when he says, nothing will work, but everything might. The next big innovation in platforms, in storytelling, in audience engagement, in journalism may have already been created. We don't know what it is yet, and it may start out small, just as the major innovations in media always have. So this is a time to support that type of experimentation, and it requires a different management style and a different approach. And it has to come from the top levels, right? It's your job to make your organizations a safe place for experiments. And these experiments can take a lot of different forms. Here are a couple that are interesting. Within the very traditional format of a news broadcast, CNN is doing some interesting things. So they're now doing real-time fact-checking. As a politician is speaking, they are checking what he said and seeing whether it contradicts the facts and displaying that in their titles. Not a hard thing to do, but something we hadn't seen before. And then on the right here is Facebook Live video, just one of many technological possibilities. I can now take this, right, an ordinary smartphone, and I can go and take this to the scene of the news and broadcast to the entire world. This was not previously possible. I needed satellite trucks and camera crews. Now, of course, the quality is not the same. There's many differences. But the point is, there are a huge number of experiments in storytelling that are very cheap and fast to do. And it's this sort of thing that we need to encourage. This will be uncomfortable for some of you. This involves risk. This raises questions of control and of quality and so forth. But without these types of rapid, cheap experiments, it's going to be very difficult to move forward. Also, I talked about different modes of storytelling and different formats earlier. One of the things that my American colleagues have discovered is that different channels need different content. So this is not a case of just taking one video program and posting it to different social media accounts. Different platforms have different interaction modes. They're viewed on different devices. They have different characteristics. So for example, as you know, Facebook videos have the sound off initially. And so we've seen many news publishers use subtitles so that the videos work without the sound. And then Snapchat is not really about text at all. It's mostly about pictures. And so we've seen picture-based storytelling evolve. Now, of course, many of you, are photographers, and picture-based storytelling is something we know about. The point is that every audience channel, every platform is in fact its own medium and runs by its own rules and is consumed on its own sorts of devices and has its own demographic. So repackaging is not going to work and has not worked for the American news organizations. They actually have specialists in each of these platforms. So to wrap up, and then I'll be happy to take some questions, and certainly happy to talk with the rest of you throughout the day. You can no longer assume that you have an audience just because you have a broadcast channel. A channel exists when you can control attention. You only know when you can control attention by collecting data on who's watching. So get the right metrics, make them visible throughout the organization, create a culture where people look at the metrics and try to understand, are we succeeding? Is anyone watching this? Should we try telling the story a different way? And then many small experiments. I've talked about sort of grand ideas, but many of the things that I've talked about can be done by a single person, at least initially. This is a time for diversification in approach. And this requires giving up a certain amount of control and letting your very talented staffs play, letting them figure out what works. And then the grandest vision of all is this question of a European content platform. Europe is in a better position than any other region in the world to do such a thing, but it will require working together. I don't see this successfully coming out of a single country. This will require a level of both technical and editorial cooperation much greater than what you have been used to so far. I think this is really a challenge, but you are in a very good place to do this. And if you have the platform, then you get to choose what the algorithm is. If you don't like the way that Facebook is filtering your content, design a different algorithm. But I really feel that this is a now or never situation. We've seen this evolution of sort of platforms owning the audience, it only happened over the last 2 or 3 years in the US. It's really now or never. You have a window to do something unique in the world. You have the talent and the resources and the opportunity, but you're going to have to act quickly, and you're going to have to cooperate at a scale that we haven't seen before. Thank you very much. Questions?
So, congratulations to give us so much question.
Oh, good.
And to say that we have to invest. No. So, the floor is yours. I think that it's really, really rich content, really enthusiastic. But yes, you ask a lot of questions, and so I'm convinced that we will have some reaction from the rooms.
Yes.
Jonathan, Emmanuel from the EBU, thank you for outlining a prospect of a bright future ahead of us. There's one thing that captured my attention is that you said if you control the platform, you control the algorithm. Conversely, you also said at the beginning that a lot of the traditional print US players have also gone with the aggregators such as Facebook and Google. Mm-hmm. With Apple News as well, we've seen more recently the launch of their platform. So isn't there a risk of disintermediation and a loss of the big data in terms of the wealth and the depth of the information that the content owners will effectively retain?
So this is part of the negotiation with the platforms. And I did have a slide about metrics as a possible target for regulation. So while I believe very strongly that you must be on these platforms, you have to go where the audience is, you have some negotiating power to set the terms. Because Facebook needs news content as much as you need Facebook. So it is a negotiation, and one of the things that you can ask for is the data that you need to understand how your content is performing.
So those are negotiable terms?
Look, everything is negotiable. The thing to understand is that they need you, right? Although they are in a very strong position because they own the eyeballs. Even iPlayer, which is an enormously successful product, users spend about 4% of their online time with iPlayer and about 20% with Facebook, right? So these are near monopolies in terms of audience viewership, right? So they have a lot of power, but they don't have anything without content, and you have the content. So that sets the frame for the negotiations. Yes.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation, really interesting, and for showing us the potential for a European platform. My question is, what's your comment on the language barriers? Because Europe has very many small language. So what's your comment on that?
Yeah, it's a fascinating problem. So in one sense, it is a local advantage. Because, of course, people want to see content in their own language, and that means they're going to prefer local content. But I think it's also, in a larger sense, it's a disadvantage because there are economies of scale that come from being able to share content. It's hard for me to imagine that there won't be more integration between countries and more content that travels between countries. Subtitling is cheap and easy to do, and on the horizon are technologies to make automated translation, to use automated translation to reduce the cost. Now, of course, as you know, you've tried Google Translate, the quality is horrible, but the quality won't be horrible forever. And there are already tools that give you a rough draft of translated subtitles. It will actually take a video program, recognize the words that are being spoken in one language, translate them into another language, and give you a first draft of the subtitles, which you can then correct. So we should expect translation to become cheaper. And therefore, I think we should expect to see more people watching content outside of their own language.
Hi, Simon Fell, EBU. There was a trend a little while ago with a company called Demand Media who started to do algorithmically generated stories based on search terms. They now seem to have morphed into something called eHow, but I just wondered whether that was a trend which you thought was maybe a negative for algorithms.
Yeah, so you mentioned Demand Media, and there have been other companies that have tried to use search data and other types of user demand data to drive content production and produce massive, very cheap content. So the content was terrible, as you know, and part of what happened there is Google made a change in their search rankings to downvote such content. And Facebook has done similar things. And the reason they did that is because these platform companies have an interest in presenting high-quality content to the users. So there is actually an alignment of interest between the user, the platform, and the content producer. These companies have an incentive to produce or to show results that people want to see. So while in the short term it might be possible to game an algorithm, all of these platform providers are working very hard to make sure that their algorithm actually produces results that people want to see. So while this type of thing, it concerns me in some sense, but I think the long-term trend is towards quality. And if you look at Google's guidelines on how to have a highly ranked page, Facebook's guidelines on how to have a widely viewed post, they drive this home over and over again. Go for quality.
And thank you for your presentation. In my own organization, there are two I suppose, conflicting views about this area. I work for the BBC. One is that attribution at this stage is not important, that getting the content to the audience, no matter going where the audience are, is at this stage more important than getting the content attributed. Another school of thought is, what's the point in being the platform if the audience don't attribute the value back to the public service media? What is your own view of this discussion?
Well, so this leads to the question of what do you want from someone viewing your content, right? So if you are a commercial publisher, you have to monetize that in some way. So you may want the right to put advertising in front of it. And so we're starting to see things like Facebook doing revenue sharing for video, right? So they'll run a video ad and then the producer gets part of it. There's that kind of approach. Or alternatively, at the other end of the spectrum, as a public service broadcaster, maybe you don't care about anything except getting the information out there. Maybe you just want to fulfill your mission of having informed people. Now, I suspect that in reality you're somewhere in the middle, which is that you do want people to see your programming as widely as possible. You're not paid through views directly, so you don't need to run advertisements against it. But you do need them to know that it was the BBC to build the brand and maintain the trust and so forth. And so that raises the question of branding and how does branding interact with distributed content. And I don't have anything brilliant to say there other than I see a lot of people putting logos on their videos so that no matter where they're watched, people know where they're coming from. And I think that's the key of it, is to have a distinctive voice, right? So to have a BBC voice such that it's recognizable no matter where someone encounters it.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation. Well, but what we are struggling with, following up on Ken's question here, is we decided in 2011 that our mission is not to get the audience to come to us, it is to get our content to the audience, and we have been doing that constantly since. But then you automatically, of course, also see less of an audience coming to you. I mean, that's inevitable. or whatever it's called in English. So the question is, do you seriously really think that it is possible to both bring your content to the audience, place it on Facebook, use Snapchat or whatever, and at the same time build a European platform?
I had a long conversation with Guillaume about this last night. I think it's necessary to pursue both strategies at this time. It would be suicide not to distribute your content across many platforms today, because that's where the audience is. I remember I defined a channel as the ability to control attention. By that metric, it's the platforms that have the channels to the online audiences. We don't have a lot of choice. You have to go there. At the same time, there are reasons to be unhappy about that. Their interests may not be aligned with the interests of public service media and the values that you hold. And frankly, you may not want Americans to control what Europeans are seeing, and I understand that. So in the longer term, you may wish to control that algorithm, and that means you have to have a platform strategy. You have to build an online channel. So I think we're in a situation where we kind of have to pursue both strategies right now.
But to follow up on that then, I mean, we all have national platforms, as you pointed out.
Yeah.
I mean, if you build a European platform, and you really want people to go there, then it has to have something exclusive. Otherwise, why would they? Why wouldn't they just stay with their already in the party where they've been for years? Why would they come to you? So what is the key here?
Right, so you have to offer some sort of value above going to Facebook, right, or going to Netflix. And as content people, I think it's very easy to understand that exclusive content can be a draw. And we have seen this as part of the strategy of Netflix and Amazon, is that they invest in original content which is only available on that platforms. And that can be part of the strategy. However, coming from the technology world, the design and construction of the platform itself can draw people. Right, so remember, algorithms are solving this problem where, I have this much content and this much time. Do you have a better solution to that problem than other people? The recommendation engine can be a draw. The usability is hugely important. Viewing is moving to mobile devices and tablets. Do you support that better than your competitors? There's, from a product point of view, the product is more than the content. The product is the entire experience around that content. And it is that experience that you are selling, and that experience that you're trying to get users to engage in. So I think there is scope for uniqueness and differentiation, but we have to think outside of just the programming itself.
And how do you monetize the platform? Is it subscription the trend, or is it commercials the trend?
Well, okay, so this is interesting. So I'm going to speak to the American market because obviously the European broadcasters are funded in a whole variety of ways. To date, it has been mostly advertising. So at the moment, we might see three broad categories. One is, there's so many names for this, and all of them are horrible. Sponsored content, effectively, sometimes also called native advertising. So the way that BuzzFeed and sites like Vox and even now the New York Times make advertising money is they have this creative team. The creative team knows how to make content that is widely shared and is distributed all these places. A company comes to them and says, make me something that people will watch and share online. So basically they're taking the role of a creative agency because they know their audience and they know the distribution and they have creative people. And interestingly, most of these organizations have a firewall between editorial and advertising. So while they use the same infrastructure, it's actually different people who are doing the advertising versus the editorial. So that's one strategy. Video is very hot right now. Facebook believes that in 5 years your news feed will be entirely video, and they're really pushing the live video product. Now, I don't know the extent of this trend, right? I think we have to sort of bring down the hype a little bit. Nonetheless, we do see video revenue sharing happening. So YouTube, for example, has the YouTube Partners program where they run advertising and you get a revenue share. And so there are organizations who are funding themselves through revenue shares on advertising. And then we have the subscription model. I think this is underexplored. It's essentially impossible at this point to support a news organization through banner ads, just normal static ads on the web. The rates are too low. You can go to video, you can go to sponsored content, but more and more organizations have decided that subscription is their future. And so, of course, the New York Times is an offering, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal. We've seen this more in sort of the high-end press, but also in other areas. YouTube Red just debuted. This is a $10 a month service that removes the ads and gives you some premium content. And, of course, users already pay for things like Amazon and Netflix. So then we see hybrids of these strategies. There's maybe a free version with advertising and a premium version with a subscription. All of the above. I wish I had a clearer answer. Where?
Yeah, thank you. I think that one of the main sort of objectives of public service media is really to give a broad variety of information and give the full picture. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's one problem which you also mentioned with your Amazon example, that people usually stay in their bubble. They just consume information which confirms their beliefs. So what can you do to get people out of the bubble? Because there, of course, you have it in the Facebook context, you have recommendations from your friends, but then on the public service media platforms, you will also develop recommendation systems. Mm-hmm. So how can you do this to get them out of the bubble?
So you can design the algorithms to recommend content that is outside of the bubble. The trick is specifying what that means, right? So, should I show you information about space exploration, or should I show you information about nutrition? Well, maybe, but this is not the type of bubble we're concerned about. Normally, when people talk about these bubbles, they're concerned about political bubbles. In principle, you can design an algorithm which tries to select information opposite the type of information you see, right? So, and you can do this issue-based, right? So if I'm reading about, I don't know, the refugee issue from one political point of view, I can find a story about the same topic from another point of view, and I can present that to you as well. We haven't seen a lot of these types of experiments yet. There have been, people have designed the algorithms in principle. None of the big platforms have implemented yet because they're not really attending to this problem. It's also not completely clear that these bubbles are occurring. In other words, are the platforms a cause or an effect of this type of polarization? But regardless of whether they are the cause of this, there is still the question of whether there is an intervention, whether there is something that these platforms could do to reduce this. Now, personally, I'm not convinced that merely showing people information from an opposing viewpoint is enough. If you have a strong opinion, facts may not change your mind. I'm much more interested in the possibility of connecting people. So I think it might be less about showing me an article from the other side than pointing out that one of my friends already holds this belief, or connecting me to someone who does. My sense is that how people come to really understand the other is through personal contact as opposed to just facts. So there's a wide open space. It would take a platform dedicated to experiments to see what will work.
Yes. My question is, do you think that this system that you are proposing is compatible with the European regulation on privacy?
Okay, so this is the question of privacy and surveillance. If we're collecting all of this data, what are the legal and ethical issues there? Yeah, fascinating. So one of the things I don't like about the way that the internet works is that advertising depends on pervasive surveillance. I think there are things that you can do here. This is a complicated topic, but briefly, one of the key issues is consent, right? So I'm going to collect some data about you, but I want you to know what data I'm collecting and what I'm going to do with it. Because there is a benefit for me to give you some of that data. If you track what I watch, maybe I get the benefit of you recommend me things that I want to watch. So to me, without commenting on the legal aspects, which are complex, the core of the ethics is this idea of informed consent. I have to know what data you're collecting and what you're doing with it. And I think those obstacles are surmountable. I think that people will willingly give up their data in exchange for value in return. Okay, you don't agree? Okay, well let's talk later.
A last question. You are saying there is a potential for European platform now or never.
Uh-huh.
What happens if we don't do anything, which is likely to be the case?
Okay. So this is the scenario I see unfolding. The big tech players, so Google, Facebook, Netflix, Amazon, and so forth, which, by the way, I don't think we should call them tech players. I think we should call them media companies. By my definition of a channel, they have the channels. They control audience attention. So anyway, the big American tech media companies are right now investing to expand their offerings to every part of the globe. And they have a lot of money and a lot of audience. So I think the situation in which you do nothing is one in which the European market starts to look very much like the American market, which is most of the time spent on digital platforms and increasingly most of the time spent with any type of media as traditional media consumption declines goes to a small number of very large companies who do not have this tradition of public service and do not have the tradition of the same sorts of values that we all hold dear. This outcome worries me as a journalist because while these platforms understand media, that is getting content in front of people, they don't necessarily understand the principles of journalism. And as much as I work on the cutting edge of journalism and data and algorithms and all of this sort of stuff, I'm very much rooted in the tradition of journalism being an essential element of democracy. And I don't think they have that tradition. All right, thank you very much.
Extremely good conclusion.
Thank you.